listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by Nax. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
There's no question that labor is the biggest issue facing the convenience industry and really every industry. And what most businesses are doing is they're trying to find ways to minimize the time from an open position to somebody's in that position. We're going to talk about a different approach where maybe you take a little bit more time and it leads to some pretty good results in reducing turnover. Today on Convenience Matters, we're talking about some labor strategies. And joining us today is Alex Olympidis. He is President of Operations at Family Express. So thanks for joining us today, Alex.
Jeff, it's really my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So before we dive into the premise today, which is different ways to look at how do you hire, you want to give a little background on Family Express. I know you've always put an emphasis on human resources, but give us a little description, better than I can, of what Family Express is and what you believe and how that fits into some of your HR strategies.
Well, we're a vertically integrated chain of about 80 stores in Indiana. We do our own self-distribution. We have our own bakery. And most importantly, we're known in our communities that we serve for having a uniquely friendly workforce. Untypical to the industry, we screen about 50 applicants to hire just one.
50 to hire just one.
That's right.
So 2%.
Well, we like to say that that's a lower acceptance rate than Harvard University. Never mind that that's not how statistics really work, but it sounds great.
You beat me to the punch on that one. Well done.
I know you and I both applied at Harvard.
They wouldn't even let me, but that's okay.
I didn't waste their time.
I've been to Harvard, but that's just walking across the
And
campus.
you studied there at the library, so you studied at Harvard.
Absolutely, great. Yes. So yeah, I'll non sequitur there aside. You've always put a big emphasis on HR. HR, you have training, you have all these elements that fit into what Family Express is all about.
Yeah, I'm not sure we have a choice. We serve communities, and as the forward-facing business that we are, if we're not great to our people, if we're not a great employer of choice, the community will choose to shop elsewhere. As you know, in our business, there's a lot of places to go, and there's a lot of competition. If we're not great to our people, we think our customers will go elsewhere.
That really is also reflective in the name. Most companies, when they create names, it has something to do with their name or some misspelling of the word fast, quick, easy, etc. The name of your company has family in it, and that's deliberate. You want to talk about that strategy?
Jeff, I certainly can't take any credit for the name. I think that happened at or around the time I was born, but it is both who we are and who we serve. Families, as you know, come in all shapes and sizes, and we aim to treat each other like a family would here at work. But we also want to serve your family in whatever capacity that is. By the way, that includes, in our case, even pets, by serving your pet through a pet wash at any number of locations in our portfolio.
I've seen along the way, we'll talk about labor in a second, but since you mentioned pets, huge opportunity for a lot of stores. I remember years ago going to Lenard's, which is, I think, in the Guinness Book of Records as the most food sales per square foot. They have a handful of stores in the Connecticut area. Every checkout on the left-hand side was impulse items for people. On the right-hand side, impulse items for pets. And you just see out of stocks. And when there's out of stocks of something, sure, you never want to have one. But sure, it's also saying these things were moving.
Well, they're an important part of your family. I can tell you on the flip side of that, Jeff, on the employee end, at Family Express, you are encouraged and allowed to send flowers to anyone for any reason. And when a person dies, we have all sorts of opportunity to grieve. When a pet dies, we send flowers to the family because I don't know. I'm a pet person. When my pet passes away, I'd like to know that people cared about that pet as much as I did, or care about me as much as I cared about that pet.
It really ties into the whole customer experience, the employee experience, and we had Zainab Tan speak at the NAC show, and one of the things she talked about is when wages are tight and you have two people that are making X dollars per hour and they're living in an area that a cost of living is whatever, and they have one kid. In some cases, they're underwater every month, which means
Sure.
they need to get a second job. And when they get a second job, that means they're coming to your job and they're tired, or they'll go somewhere else for a couple cents more per hour. So let's talk about your whole strategy with labor, where you look to differentiate yourself and get the right person instead of the fast person.
Yeah, and we're certainly not looking to hire anybody who's tired. We're looking to provide, as that author who did a great job in the Good Job Strategy pointed out, we're looking to hire people who want to be here, who want to have a servant demeanor, and can be enjoying themselves while I'm here. I think we're close to statistically a zero overtime company. And the reason we're a zero overtime company is because we know at a certain point, your ability to be friendly and your ability to build relationships with new people who walk through the door diminishes.
And the old saying is, if the way you hire is by having a help wanted sign on the window, you're probably going to get somebody that, if it's just a singular thing, not positions available. But like you see in the movies where somebody grabs the help wanted sign, walks in, and says, "I'm your guy."
Yeah, yeah.
It's a lot more complicated than that to get your guy.
I always think, Jeff, about the restaurant that has a now hiring cook sign. Do I really want to eat at a restaurant that is hiring a cook?
Mm-hmm. So you have a more complicated. Well, complicated's the wrong word. A more involved process from filling a position, but at this, correct me if I'm wrong, more than a month on average.
Yeah.
But how do you also manage the before we get into the specifics that you do, how do you manage when somebody says, "I need someone today, please help me"?
Well, what works for Family Express won't work for everyone. And this is just the situation that we're in. We have the competitive advantage of being, we have the competitive advantage of a tight logistical model. So we've had the discipline over a lot of years to standardize operational systems. So if one store is feasting with employees and has hired more than they need, and of course, this happens to us where somebody gets COVID or somebody quits with no notice, happens to us as well. Another store will have somebody who's ready and available. A lot of times that's the manager that says, "Look, this is a great opportunity. I have a great number two at my home store. I'll go to that store that needs some help to give my number two an opportunity to learn, develop, and grow here on their own, take the training wheels off while I go assist at a different store."
So you have this selective process, more selective than
Sure.
Harvard. Uh, what is involved in this process, and how do you get everybody to buy in and say the process works? I'm all bought in.
I wouldn't call it a process, and I wouldn't call it certainly a strategy. If I had proposed taking 37 days to make one hire, I think maybe my family would be questioning if I'm in the right line of work. But if I could make it one day, I would make it one day. The problem is we just can't find a way to find great hires very quickly. So the process is to make ourselves as selective with a new hire as we are with a lot of other things in our lives. We're really selective about hiring executives. We're really selective about our friendships. We're very selective about relationships in our lives. And we want to be really selective about the people who carry our brand to our customers who walk through the doors. When we hire at Family Express, we have to ask ourselves, no matter what the hire is, two questions. Question number one is, do you have good reason to think this person will be here in a year? You might be wrong. They might be here 20 years. And question number two is probably the most important, and that's, would you invite them to your home for breakfast with your family? And if you wouldn't invite them to your home for breakfast with your family, you probably shouldn't select them to work in our stores.
That's a great question, and it reminds me, there's something I read years ago. The comic writer, actress Tina Fey. They asked her what the best piece of advice she ever got, and she said it was from Lorne Michaels, the executive producer of Saturday Night Live, and it had to do with hiring. And he said, you should only hire people, because Saturday Night Live is on live, and when you work up to that week, you're working around the clock often. You're working till 1, 2, 3 in the morning to bang out a new 90 minutes every week. His response was, when somebody's walking down the hall towards you at 2 o'clock in the morning, you don't want to turn around and walk the other direction.
That's a great Lorne Michaels line.
And that's essentially the same thing as if you don't want a coworker coming over your house for breakfast, you probably don't want to go to work every day with that coworker.
I can give you a little bit of the how and why it takes 37 days, but that's sort of what we say in our orientation is it's a pass or fail orientation. And that can be a scary thing for somebody. They have probably left their previous place of work. In some cases, they've traveled to be with us. In many cases, we've put them up in a hotel. And we tell them when they're here, we tell them before they're here, that it's a pass or fail orientation. And the question that the way we pose this, Jeff, is, look, we know that's scary, but let's assume you graduate. Roughly 80% of the people who get to orientation will graduate. It means 20% will not. Let's assume you graduate. And if you graduate, would you like us to be as selective with your future coworkers as we are going to be with you in this 3-day orientation? I have never had a person answer in the negative to that question. Folks want us to be selective with their coworkers.
That's a really powerful thought.
How we get into that is kind of important. And, anytime we mention this 37 days to anybody, it scares off a lot of people right off the bat, especially smaller retailers. So the emphasis is not on 37 days. If we could do it in less, we certainly would. The emphasis is on just being really selective. The first method of selection is we've been proponents of industrial psychology for well over 25 years. We think that any screening test is better than no test because we fundamentally believe that despite the fact that some people have applied, they're really screaming at us that they do not want to work here. They're screaming, I don't want to be in front of people. I don't have a servant mentality. I don't want to give my all. And when one says that, we listen. So that's how you screen down from a lot of folks who are willing to take the job to a more selective approach, as I say, to somebody who really wants to work here. We consider the interview to be a conversation, just like we're having now. And as a rule, we do not allow anyone to be offered a job the same day as their interview. We want somebody to go home, think about it, talk with their family, marinate on it. Gosh, that interview was really conversational. It was different than every other interview I've ever had. And goodness, I hope they call me back. So from there, we require that they give at least 2 weeks' notice to their current employer, especially if that current employer should happen to be a competitor. We think if we require that, it's less likely that someone will leave us with no notice. And then our orientation begins on Mondays. So that adds some days. If you were offered the job on a Sunday, you may wait another 7 or 8 days until the next orientation class begins. And finally, as I said before, that orientation is a pass or fail orientation. So that's 3 days where we are perpetually asking the question, do you think you're the right person at the right place at the right time for this role? And if you're not, that's okay too. We thank you. We appreciate you, and we hope you remain a wonderful customer of Family Express. But if this is not the right role for you, we're not trying to convince you to work here. We're trying to convince you not to work here.
Mm-hmm.
And we're hoping that, when we talk about this kind of touchy-feely, fuzzy stuff of building relationships and building communities and being servants, this captures the heart of certain people, and certain people it won't. But for those who really get excited about that, by the end of the 3 days, they say this is kind of a Disneyland experience. And I'm ready to go face the challenges and build relationships in the communities we serve.
And these are for both store level people and for headquarters people.
Well, that's an interesting question, Jeff. Over 50% of our headquarters people started as store people. I'm one of them. I served in our stores for many, many years and really think of myself as a successful sales associate today. But if anybody is hired for, let's say, an executive level position, they will be mandated to work in our stores for a period of time, depending on that position. And they come away with a true respect for how hard it is to be a sales associate at Family Express and greet the 800th customer in a day with the same friendliness that we greet the first customer of our day.
Yeah, there's a chain little larger than yours, quite a bit larger. And when you walk to their headquarters, there's a store, a functioning store, as soon as you walk through the lobby. And a couple things there. They're able to test new ideas. They're able to have vendors walk through things. But they said the most important thing is it's a daily visual reminder of who you work for. And it's the store. And I just thought that was a fantastic philosophy in just reminding people every day, this is who we work for. It's not a department. It's not a boss. It's the store.
Yeah, I think you're talking about Sheets, who's done a phenomenal job, and they too, if I'm right, and I think I am, have been proponents of industrial psychology for a long time.
Quick Trip with a K also does it.
Quick Trip with a K, absolutely, and Quick Trip with a K too delivers phenomenal results in the area of turnover retention and brand loyalty from their employees.
I liked what you had said earlier about people that work for the company represent your brand. And we saw it this summer. We were on the road with our chairman, Don Rhodes. I went to 36 stores with him. Some we had planned visits. Some we had planned visits with executives. But just as many were, hey, there's a right-hand turn. Let's go in and say hi. And that's where you really see the people working in the store are the brand. There's not a manager to be seen. There's not an executive to be seen. And you just walk in there and you say, how's it going? And your whole perception of that store or that chain is based on that interaction if you've never had an interaction with that chain before. And it's amazing.
It's a competitive advantage for us as hirers, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly wouldn't be cut out for factory work. That would not be something that gets me excited every day. But I am excited every day to build relationships. And here's the reality that I know as a sales associate at heart. I know if I have 800 customers in a day, someone is stopping at a Family Express store because they're on their way to a job that is terribly miserable, with a boss that does not treat them with respect. And they stop off at our store because someone in a Family Express uniform at some point has treated them with kindness and respect and humanity. And there are people every single day that are leaving jobs that they love to go to a home life that's colossally unfair and dark and sometimes sad.
Mm-hmm.
And they stop off at a Family Express store for one moment of somebody treating them with kindness. That is a competitive advantage in hiring for our business. That's a benefit, rather.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a traditional benefit in the way we usually talk about benefits, but delivering happiness and giving joy to others is, for some people, many I would contend, part of our purpose.
Absolutely. And it's not easy. And I like something I remember somebody saying about Family Express a number of years ago, talking about your square donuts. And it's a personification. And the line is, we have square donuts because we don't cut corners.
Yeah.
And it's a great way of saying that, sometimes there's easy ways and sometimes there's more difficult ways. But if the difficult ways will lead a better result, that's often the approach that you take.
Dad always says if it were easy, everybody would be doing it. So we find joy in the difficult and we find joy in the result.
And there's a lot of joy in the difficult. And Kevin Paul Scott, who was a speaker in one of the he is. And one of the things he's talking about is he was saying we need to make things simple instead of complex for workers.
Right.
And then the other thing was, should it be hard or should it be easy in developing these things? And everybody said easy. And then he said, wait a minute. So why don't you guys think about like your 3 biggest achievements at work? How many of them were easy? And then it's like, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Easy may be temporary, but there's not the same satisfaction. There's not the same joy in planning. Not that you need to make things difficult, but sometimes breaking things apart and putting them back together where they belong, there's joy in that, in doing it, and there's especially joy in the results.
Well, not just in work, but in life. Parenting is hard, but I don't have a bigger joy than my kids.
Yeah. So I was talking about the NAC show. I have to wrap up by just sharing. I'm busy in general sessions and meetings and all this other stuff during the show. I get like an hour every year to venture out of whatever I'm doing, check out the show floor, meet with some people, etc. Alex, I know you're not a supplier, but for some reason, I take a right-hand turn around an aisle, and there you are.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's a retailer I've seen more on the show floor than you, which means you are taking full advantage of those 1,000 minutes. I think it's 990 minutes exactly of expo time, but it's always great to see you at the show. And then this year it was just like, hey, can we talk about this today? And just, absolutely, let's set it up. So it's always a pleasure.
I love seeing you on the show floor, Jeff. We always have a great conversation, whether it's something intellectually stimulating and serious about our industry, or if it's just deciding on where the best food is that day. Either way, love running into you.
Same here. And we also talked about having some influencers visiting your place. So maybe we'll talk about that another time, if and when it happens.
Would love to have that chat.
So thanks for joining us today, Alex. There is no question that labor is our most important issue, and there's all kinds of different ways to address it. I think you laid out some really important questions and some ideas for a lot of businesses to think about as they mitigate what's going on here. So thanks again for joining us today.
Jeff, thanks for having me. Thanks for all you do.
And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.